Salut les beaux et les belles gosses. My name is Brian, and today I want to talk to you about something that I personally struggled a lot with, which is the loneliness epidemic in America, and how I escaped it by moving to Europe. People often refer to this as the male loneliness epidemic, which is kind of unfair since everyone is getting lonelier in America, even though men do struggle the most. So for this video, I'm going to be focusing exclusively on the differences in social dynamics between Europe and the US, and I'm going to leave out some of the more obvious and superficial factors like the lack of third spaces and work-life balance, because at this point, that's stuff that everyone kind of already knows. So this is all going to be based on my personal experience. You might have a very different take on this, and if that's the case, I highly encourage you to share it in the comments below, and that way we can all learn from it. Now, before I get into it, I just want to put it out there that yes, I know that culture and behavior can vary a lot, from one European country to another, but I've met, studied, and worked with Europeans from all over the continent, except the Balkans, and there definitely is a very distinct European approach to socializing and relationships. All right, let's do this. Something I really struggled with in the US was how you needed to fit into a certain mold for people to truly accept you as a friend. For some reason, Americans are just conditioned to identify as part of a subgroup, and if you want to make friends with someone, you have to be part of the same subgroup that they're in. And I'm not just talking about race or ethnicity either. I feel like after high school especially, friendships are almost entirely decided by whether or not you have the same interests, the same hobbies, the same political ideology or worldview. Like, if you don't fit perfectly in a box, or if you say or do one wrong thing, people will drop any consideration of letting you become an actual friend. There is an extreme level of polarization in America when it comes to discourse on social issues and politics, and it just keeps feeding this tribalism. And we're all so caught up in hating each other that we just can't see how this culture is destroying us from the inside. In Europe, on the other hand, people connect as individuals first. Like, on paper, I shouldn't really have the friends that I have now because I share almost none of their interests. Like, I don't watch soccer nor F1, which is a really big deal. I don't really like partying to techno or going to raves. I'm the only one out of all my friends that watches anime. I have a pretty unique political opinions. Despite all this, it's never stopped us from connecting with each other as good friends. In general, Europeans handle differences extremely well compared to Americans, at least. Like, it feels so good being able to discuss social issues and politics freely with my friends without having to worry that they'll actually end up hating me for having a different opinion. You can disagree with someone on a lot of things, but you can still be really good friends. And I feel like something like that is extremely rare in America. Going back to how socially cutthroat Americans are compared to Europeans, let me just give you a funny story from my own life. Way back in 2022, I was introduced to this Polish girl at a bar through a mutual friend. And as soon as this girl introduced herself as Alexa, the first thing that came out of my mouth was, "Alexa, play Despacito." Keep in mind that this was a meme from 2018, and I was still saying it in 2022 to someone I had just met, and I said it to her multiple times that same night. We were both international students studying abroad in France, so we were kind of stuck in the same group for the next 3 months. And I just kept saying this to her almost every time we saw each other. Somehow we're still good friends almost 4 years later, and we still make the effort to see each other at least once a year, despite the fact that she lives in Poland and I live in France. One thing I know for sure though is that if she was American, our friendship would have never existed. Like, she would have written me off as a weirdo that very first night we met. There's this hyper-individualistic culture in America where it's every man for himself, I gotta take care of mine. And this mindset just makes people deprioritize forming real human connections in the name of ambition. This mindset is the reason why Americans are hyper-conscious of social status compared to Europeans. Like, Americans will only invest time in you only if they can see you increasing their value at some point in the future. They'll only hang out with people that they see as being on the same level as them or higher. Everybody always wants something. And one painfully obvious way that that played out in my own life was how most people that I met in New York this year only became interested in me after they learned that I could speak French fluently and that I lived in France. Before that, I was just another guy. But the second they realized that I was on a level that they wanted to get to, Suddenly I was someone that they deemed worthy of talking to. On the other hand, simply being curious and actually trying with someone can take you a long, long way in Europe. Like, people here don't size you up first. They give you a chance to show who you really are, and then, friendships just kind of naturally blossom from there. One other thing that I've noticed is how Americans spend so much more time with their significant other compared to Europeans. I feel like it's a very common experience for Americans to have their friends drop off from the face of the earth once they get into a relationship, and you basically lose a lot of friendships this way. In Europe, this doesn't really happen because people here put a lot of importance in maintaining their own social life even after getting into a relationship. It's also very socially encouraged to invite your partner whenever you're hanging out with your friends because it's a nice way for them to make more friends too. Social media addiction is a big problem everywhere, but I feel like it's far worse in the US than it is in Europe because of how much it actually discourages people from meeting each other in real life on such a large scale. For example, I know a lot of American millennials and Gen Zs who watch Twitch streams or even streams themselves, but I haven't met a single person in Europe that does that. The concept of watching someone live stream instead of actually going outside and living your own life is just an extremely foreign concept here. Online friend groups through platforms like Discord are already quite common in the US, but in my experience, that kind of thing is extremely rare in Europe. Most Europeans I know, especially those who haven't been Americanized, rarely spend much time on social media and they rarely ever post anything. In general, Europeans use social media as a way to store their memories and stay connected with their close friends, rather than for self-expression or validation, which is how a lot of Americans tend to use it. When it comes to male friendships in Europe, there definitely is a higher level of tenderness and vulnerability. In my experience, men here never hesitate to express their emotions. Like, they won't even think twice before talking about their feelings. It doesn't happen that much, so it's very subtle, but it does make a huge difference. The discussions I have with men here feel much less suffocating because I'm encouraged to talk about, things that go deeper than the usual surface level topics like work or sports or current events, whatever. There's a tenderness that comes through in the way that, European men interact with each other. Sometimes it can be small things like compliments. Like, for example, my French friends have called me beau gosse many, many times. Sometimes it can be deeper words of appreciation like, you're a good guy, and it's always a pleasure being with you, and I love you, bro. Things like that. And then there's also a lot of physical affection like shoulder grabbing and hugging. It's just a lot more physical contact in general. Yes, stuff like this is way more common in the Latin/Mediterranean part of Europe, but I have experienced this with Scandinavian men as well. Not gonna lie, when I first moved to Europe, I thought that men doing la bise with each other was so weird, and I couldn't bring myself to do it. Like, why would I want to touch another guy's face? But then, after a few years of living here and seeing how comfortable European men are with each other, I realized it's actually so fucking wholesome, and we need more of that everywhere. There are a lot of people in this world that, despite the fact that they truly want to make friends with other people, they end up distancing themselves because of the fear of rejection. And I truly think that this tenderness that I've seen in the way that Europeans socialize with each other, I think that that's the answer for this problem. It just helps break a lot of walls down, and it makes people feel safe to reach out. At least that was the case for me. That same tenderness and openness carries over into friendships between men and women in Europe as well. I feel like in America, most women have the assumption that every guy that's trying to talk to them has some sort of bad intention, so they always have their guard up and they always keep themselves at a distance emotionally. But I found that in Europe, women are way more eager to open up and let you in as a friend. Friend groups are just way more mixed here. Like, every European guy I know has a lot of female friends. And in my case, most of my friends in Europe are actually women. It's something that just feels normal here, but it's not the norm in the US at all. Alright, those were my thoughts on why the loneliness epidemic in America doesn't really exist in Europe, or at least it's not nearly as big of an issue here. Let me know if what I said made sense, or if I missed anything in the comments below. If you're an American that moved to Europe like I did, I'm very curious to hear about your experience and whether it lines up with mine. Thank you so much for watching. That's all I have for you guys today, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye now.